the next goal really is about how do we enable scale in clinical operations. And the fundamental idea of that is if we can, next slide. Basically, how do we simplify the practice of health? Thank you. So pretty much over the next 4 years, what we've done is basically a confluence of big data, big analytics, health in the cloud, and this really was not possible until we have today. If you look at it, fundamentally, the amount of data that we have about 100 million relationships costing about 30 gigs, was simply very difficult to have 30 years ago. Definitely impossible 10 years ago, and now we can do it. Being able to deliver that to everybody through the internet now is actually possible. And also having the speed of processing to have the algorithms that run that. So in effect, what we've done is created an analytical engine that takes this 100 million points of data, complex algorithms, takes whatever clinical information you have, something very simple from symptoms, age, genders, duration, lifestyles, computes all of that and comes back with what is a differential that makes sense and all the potential next steps. Our goal is to pretty much deliver that through apps and APIs to patients, providers, health IT developers, and payers. And the problem that we're looking at solving, and thus we've actually created Clinical GPS, is dealing with the issue of the clinical expertise shortage, aka our problem of scale. And how do you go ahead and make sure the right resources are applied? The person is triaged to the right location, you've got the right x-rays and the rest. Another way of thinking about it basically is think about E-Trade or Charles Schwab for healthcare. Basically apps that enable an individual such as a nurse practitioner or a mid-level tech to start doing a whole lot more. How can you go ahead and enable patients themselves to start taking more of the burden of the process so that the doctors can focus on what it is they actually do best? Really, one of the things we developed was what we call our triage and care report. So after being able to synthesize all this data you've collected for somebody, you're able to come back to someone and say, here's the potential triage level, here's the top level from a differential perspective, both acutely and then also looking chronically what that happens to be, and that leads into what we call our future health analysis. So it's really important, one, from an acute presentation issue, but also to look at it from an overall perspective to understand chronically what's going on, so you can really kick off very targeted sort of preventative behaviors. Basically what I'm going to do right now is quickly sort of really flip through very quickly here, sort of the interfaces. And our focus really here was to make something very simple that anyone can use, via an Apple iPad or a computer or anything of that nature. And really being able to go ahead and very quickly analyze very complex sets of information. Obviously our stuff is connected with EHRs and the rest. And really in some senses what we're talking about is how do you have enough data to make sense of data? And really that's part of what the last 4 years has been. It's been a large meta-analysis of all the stats that are there from the CDC, NIH, etc. And really what we've come about is a combination of deductive as well as inductive. So basically we have 100 million data points, but then you start having people go through the system and you start learning. So just like people go through med school, they build a scaffolding of information and knowledge, and then through experience basically you adjust that. And obviously when you have a sort of an impedance mismatch between these two is where you need to start looking at potentially there's a problem with our fundamental understanding. So as I sort of said in the beginning, we've cross-connected symptoms, diagnoses, age, genders, genetics, all these different pieces of information, so that now with the data that we're collecting in our EHRs, through things like 23andMe, through our daily behavior habits, how do you synthesize all of that into making sense? Really on Wednesday we had a large discussion about data and health and how the sort of the things are coming together, and one of the main things is clinical analytics. How do you start making things like that in sense, and how do you do so in real time? And that was very much our focus. And the next focus is we know we can't do everything. So our goal is really how do we empower people in a larger sense, and we do this through APIs and basically our cloud offering. And so we have different people from a couple telcos working on telco health, leveraging our API. We have folks in India, folks in China working on apps focused for those environments. We have things focused in China and in Africa as well. So basically really how do we sort of kick off this next form of health by enabling sort of an automated, one may say in a far future AI sort of physician available to everybody on demand that can really act as backup and guidance to really enable us to sort of deal with the issue of scale. So, it's all ability of, dealing with the supply demand imbalance that we have, dealing with all the sorts of data that we're going to be collecting from all the different sensors, and fundamentally simplifying the practice of health. So if you would, love to hear your feedbacks on what we're doing. Our goal is to right now partner with as many people as possible, sort of giving them access to what we have, and really sort of laying the next foundation of not only just data, but analytics that people can talk about creating these 1 million apps that we had mentioned before. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate it.